everyone, and welcome to today's exciting discussion on implementing GenAI, strategies, challenges, and future trends. I'm Saloni, and I'm delighted to be hosting this insightful session today. We have two distinguished experts with us, Tathagat Varma, AI thought leader, researcher, and the mind behind the renowned Theory of Cognitive Chasms. Tathagat has been instrumental in shaping industry perspectives on GenAI adoption. And we have with us Anand Subramaniam, the Chief Solutions Officer at KANINI. Anand brings over 25 years of industry experience in data and AI with numerous flagship data projects to his name. Welcome, Tathagat and Anand.
Thanks, Saloni. Nice to be here talking to Anand.
Let's begin today's chat with the big picture. Why is GenAI such a hot topic today? Of course, it is clear that GenAI has massive potential, and which is why we are seeing 94% of CIOs today are planning to increase their AI investments, particularly this year. But this also raises a crucial question. Are organizations truly able to meet their GenAI expectations? Going by some of the latest figures that we have, only 54% of GenAI models successfully transition from pilot to production. And 70 to 80% of AI and GenAI initiatives fail to meet their intended goals. These figures are clearly highlighting a gap between ambition and execution. So what we want to understand is what is holding these organizations back in their GenAI journey. I want your expert perspectives on this. Tathagat, if you could just help us with an answer on, from your research, what are the key macro challenges that are impacting GenAI implementation across industries?
This is the question that started my interest in this topic when I was doing my doctoral research and I started my journey a few years back. I saw that there was a lot of anecdotal data that a lot of pilots were failing. In fact, the data was suggesting back then, about 3 years back, that as much as 87% of the pilots were failing to make it to production. And I was surprised that these are the companies that have a long-standing history with technology and building successful products. Even AI has the traditional AI, the machine learning, predictive AI that we've been talking about, has been around for last 10, 15 years. So it is not like it's totally out of the blue. So I was surprised what is happening because it clearly was orthogonal to the whole idea that there is an economic payoff in next 10 years in trillions of dollars. So I started my research in talking to the experts from various industries and firms. And what I found was that there were a series of challenges. One, the subject was growing so fast that there was no way to consolidate the knowledge within the industry. And everybody had kind of developed their tribal theories around what works and what does not work. And they had codified within their own firms. In the sociological research or in management research, we call them as espoused theories. And we wanted to understand, hey, what are those espoused theories? So when I started planning my research design, I said, I need to understand from them in their own language. And not just what has been expressed as an intention, but how they are actually doing it. So this is something that we call as theories in use, like how exactly they are doing, and try to consolidate them and build it into some kind of a causal framework. So that was the first thing that I was doing. Second thing, what was happening was a lot of investments were getting wasted in that process, not to mention the time, which I think is the most non-replenishable resource in the universe today. Everything else can be made available, but for time. So how do we really make sure that these firms are able to recoup their investment, they are able to continue their journey and so on? There were a lot of low-hanging fruits in terms of new skills and new talent, which is always associated with any new technology. But understanding the whole aspect of socio-technical systems in terms of what do they mean to the firm, how do they align to the business drivers? I think those were the biggest gaps that I found. And I can talk more about it, but those were the ones that led me to basically come up with my theory of cognitive chasms, where chasms are these failure modes. The journey is not like a smooth curve. There are breaks in between. There are discontinuities where the adoption falls off the cliff. And those are the ones where I identified 4 types of failure modes that I call as cognitive chasms. And maybe as we go along, I can talk more about it.
Thank you, Tathagat. Um, Anand, based on your hands-on experience of leading and implementing GenAI projects for years now, what do you think are these common pitfalls that companies usually experience when they are implementing GenAI projects?
Thank you, Saloni. I think Tathagat did cover some of the important points earlier as part of his research as well, right? And the fact that these common pitfalls are still being common shows very clearly that the industry is not yet adopting it as much as we would have liked it to do. So for me, I would like to differentiate this between two common areas. One is planning and identifying what is the necessary use case, need versus want use case, versus implementation or operationalizing the use case, right? So if you think about the planning and what is the need versus want use case, I would say enterprises are not spending enough time in understanding what are the important use cases that align well to their business vision, right? That's the biggest challenge that I see. And once they are able to do that, they are able to clearly demarcate what is the definition of done, how to really measure the outputs, and all of that follows through automatically. But the biggest challenge I see is every time, not just with generative AI, but with every new technology, there is this insatiable urge to jump into doing something without really understanding why they are doing and what they are doing. What would it take for them to really get business value? That is not being done very clearly. I can take you back to 10, 15 years before when big data was a big time boom. Many companies wanted to bring in big data. They all wanted to go and implement Hadoop. But once the data is brought into a big data platform, what to do with the data, how to use the data was grossly lacking. And as a result, many companies were not able to see the value of data. I see that is continuing as a pitfall, even in the generative AI era. Companies think that generative AI can solve many of their problems, but they have to really do a ring fencing of what are those primordial use cases that they can really plan for so that they can achieve business value. That is one big pitfall. Planning and identifying those necessary use cases that align to the business value is a very important aspect that is being missed time and again. Second is data inadequacy, right? We all say that generative AI comes with pre-trained data. It has universe of knowledge that can be extracted. But generative AI, also going back to Tathagat's point, it can put you into a chasm if you don't use it properly. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, and the haystack is like way too much in terms of billions and trillions of parameters. So if you don't know what to do with generative AI, you are almost lost. So you got to be very clear about what is your current maturity of data, where do you want to take your shop, and how will data change or drift as your business changes, and then start building generative AI use cases around your data. Data still is the oil for generative AI, right? So it is going to be very, very critical to understand the data aspects of generative AI. There are many other important points like scaling and infrastructure. All of them probably in my mind are tertiary reasons, but the first two are business alignment and data are the key for me when it comes to the common pitfalls when it comes to implementing generative AI solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tathagat and Anand, for your wonderful inputs. So it is very clear now that an enterprise may be very enthusiastic about embracing AI, but that does not necessarily mean that it is AI ready. Which of course brings us to the next question that we have. How can organizations truly assess their readiness for Gen AI and avoid these kind of Gen AI failures? Anand, if you can tell us a little bit about what is the key to understanding if an organization is in a good place to start implementing Gen AI, what are the internal readiness signals like technical, operational, cultural that organizations should assess before embarking on the Gen AI journey?
Yeah, I would truly start by looking at the people, process, technology, and the culture angle, right? For me, the cultural mindset is the key. But for any organization that has predominantly been measuring their data, they've been able to measure their data initiatives. They've been doing a good job of following processes. Their data maturity and the ability to assess what are their data gaps in a timely fashion. All of that probably gives an organization a good confidence to start venturing into generative AI. In fact, as these organizations become more and more data savvy, there is no need for them to for an external push for them to really get into generative AI. It's a natural outcome that they will start using AI, right? So for me, in terms of readiness signals, the first thing is data maturity, being able to move from just a reporting level organization all the way to being called as data savants in terms of how they measure their data. Are they creating value out of the data? How is data converting into business value? Are they able to get ROI out of the data? So that is one thing. If an organization is able to put together as a process and they already have it as a well-oiled engine, that's a natural indication that that the organization is ready in terms of using generative AI. Number one. Number two, that also means that the organization has spent enough in setting up their data infrastructure, governance policies, because what is going to happen is, whether we like it or not, when we start using generative AI, there are certain aspects that are going to really pull down the organization's growth when it comes to regulatory needs, right? Simple aspects like a simple prompt that would have ideally been written by, let's say, a subject matter expert could have resulted in a biased output. And if an organization is not ready to really handle that, then that becomes a challenge. And that's why organizations that are already having a good data infrastructure, they already have a good data governance council and an AI governance council, would be ready for implementing generative AI without fear, because they know that they can expect generative AI to falter, which means they also have the right mechanisms to stop that from faltering or being able to very quickly bounce back if such a thing happened, right? So being able to have that kind of an infrastructure in terms of processes, in terms of technology, is critical. Second is what I call as the people side of the story, right? Cross-functional AI literacy. Gone are those days where when we are talking about a person with a specific technology background cross-pollinating themselves into a newer technology space, right? AI predominantly has been a technology-savvy entity versus a business-savvy entity, and right, and that got disrupted heavily because of generative AI. Now, in the generative AI world, we want the subject matter experts and people who are actually non-technical, non-code savvy to be more AI savvy. So organizations that are willing to cross-pollinate, cross-train their employees and their subject matter experts who are non-technical into the technology side of the story is something that is a very clear signal. I just had an interaction with one of my friends in the medicine industry or the healthcare industry, and he or she was a radiologist. And the first question that they ask is their firms are asking them to learn generative AI as to know how it can be used. And they were asking more about prompt engineering and how prompt engineering can be done for them to do their jobs well. So which means this, in my mind, is a complete shift, right? Rather than a technology person learning a new technology, we are talking about people who actually do the stuff, the subject matter experts getting to know more about generative AI. And I think that cross-functional literacy is critical, and it's a very good readiness signal for an organization to venture into generative AI. Third is very, very important. In the typical AI world, people who come from machine learning world, right, they always try to measure outcomes of machine learning through at least classification-based algorithms through what is called as confusion matrix. What I feel is there was always a lacuna of how that measurement of a machine learning model turned into a business measurement, cost matrix, right, was not always very clear. Now with generative AI, it becomes extremely important that an organization has laid down all the clear rules saying what is the business outcome for me and what would be the cost it would take for me to keep running this model or running this application for me to get business value. That kind of vision needs to be set, or at least there should be a process that needs to be set, right? I think these are critical factors that for me, that I would say that as clear readiness signals for an organization to move into the Gen AI world.
Thank you, Anand. And Tathagat, beyond the points that Anand mentioned, beyond internal readiness, what do you think are the external factors, external market, regulatory, and strategic factors, in fact, that could influence an organization's AI readiness?
Sure. So first of all, I think Anand spoke extremely valid points. A lot of them overlap with my own causal framework that came out of my research. I mean, things like data or things like, in fact, I love the point that Anand made in terms of the people and culture. A lot of technocentric organizations tend to think that if I have a great technology, just bringing it itself is going to change the things. But we forget that it is the human beings who have to embrace and adopt the technology at the end of the day and apply it to align it with the business problems that are most highest priority problems. And that is where most of the gaps happen. So those are things that are absolutely valid, Anand. Thanks for raising them. In terms of the external ones, what I found was that one is obviously technology. A mature, stable, and a reliable and trustworthy technology were absolutely the antecedents in my framework, which is these were the mandatory conditions that had to be absolutely there, without which we would just not be able to do that. And what it meant essentially was three things that came out from my research. If I double click on them, the first one was the technology itself, as I said. Now, let me just qualify that, because a lot of times people have this whole thing of, hey, GenAI still has accuracy issues, it has bias issues, it has hallucination issues. The other day I was reading this research paper, that they have actually reported, they did studies and they actually found a deliberate usage of actually cheating as well. And that's what is the whole idea, right? I mean, if you look at the whole Nick Bostrom's idea of a paperclip maker, or even from Adam Smith's time, that's been the case in terms of making the paper clips and all. If you try to over-index on one single goal, and the algorithm has been designed for self-preservation around somehow keeping that goal as the true north, it will try to summon up all the resources around making sure that it meets that anyhow. So now that same thinking, the logical construct behind it, is being seen manifesting in the form of cheating. That if it is told that you have to win at a game of chess anyhow, it is not shying away from basically indulging into a blatant cheating. Now, that's obviously a very new dimensions to how we are going to see that. So technology is going to keep getting smarter and keep getting trickier, but I think the counter technology is also growing around it. We have to have our safeguards. To me, regulatory and other things have only a certain amount of things that they can do. I think the biggest safeguard against a malicious and abuse of technology has to be the human being itself. Because if we don't really trust the human beings at a fundamental manner, we are not going to be able to really get to that stage where technology can be taken reliably. So that's the first part. The second part is really from a platform perspective, that I found that having the right kind of platforms which essentially offer a democratized access to all the people, which have the right kind of safeguards available out of the box. And now we are seeing with the open source, it's becoming even more bigger of a thing both the ways. One is the access is becoming even better, because like when we saw the recent some of the open source models that are coming in, they have brought down the price point tremendously, but they've also taken away the whole concern that, hey, somebody's actually seeing it, because you have the whole issue of where is my data being stored, is it being stored somewhere else, is the information being censored, and so on and so forth. So I think those issues are also coming bigger. And the third thing that came from an external point of view was the whole use cases. That the whole explosion of use cases in the in the computational space that has happened because of these platforms. And I think if I take a step back, the big difference, because a lot of people may say, what is new around it, right? All old technologies have gone through the same kind of a thing. So I think it's worth taking a minute to actually think about what is different with generative AI. It is a what we call as a horizontal technology, or we also call it as a general purpose technology, which is also a GPT, but not the same GPT. So unlike the vertical technologies, which have a very point application, like if you look at a 3D or an additive printing, and additive printing is something that you can only do at a certain point. It's not like the world has changed because of that, for example. Or if you look at blockchain, a blockchain, you may argue that you can do and you can kind of implement it in the backbone of your entire supply chain, or and so on and so forth. Came with a lot of promise 5 years back, 7 years back. We haven't seen that changing the world. But generative AI is something which is by design, it is a more general purpose technology, which means it is not confined to one single point of application, but it can be molded into various ways. So if you are in marketing, you are in sales, you are in HR, you are in procurement, you are in legal, you are in healthcare, there are applications of that. And that's why it's important to understand that when you are going to apply it horizontally, you are going to run into all kind of challenges. Like in healthcare, for example, one of the patterns that's been coming, and we have all seen that, for example, there was this very famous video of an AI guru who said we won't be needing radiologists in 5 years, but we haven't really seen that going away. So the human thing is really continues to be important in that sense, right? So I think the key point that I want to make here is that it's not to me about the external one. Generative AI brings an additional set of challenges because of the nature of technology. And I think to me, the bigger elephant in the room is really internally inside the firms, inside the organizations. Because if they do not have the right mindset, if they do not have the right, what I call as human agency in my framework, the human agency has to be paramount, I think. And we are beginning to see that kind of a thing now, because it's not just about the shiny new technology. So unless these are the business alignment Anand spoke about in terms of really saying what are the problems we want to solve, I think those are more important to me, because the same technology is likely to be more successful in some companies versus the other. So we cannot clearly blame the technology. We must search internally and ask, what am I doing wrong, or what am I doing differently? What can I learn from other sectors or other industries or even other functions, so that I am able to adopt the technology better.
Thank you, Tathagat. Thank you, Anand. You've shared some great insights on GenAI readiness for our viewers today.